From here on out, I do want to notify our listening audience that you are more than welcome to submit questions to any of our speakers in the chat box function. We will do our absolute best to address your question following each speaker, and it will take about 5 minutes to have a Q&A dialogue. So, great segue. Our next speaker is no strangers to us all. Allow me to introduce you to a son of our city, a graduate of Morehouse College and the Sanford University Cumberland School of Law, and who for the last 4 years has stood on the principles of servant leadership and his vow to put people first, the Honorable Mayor Randall Woodfin. But before Mayor Woodfin gives his updates on neighborhood revitalization, budget, and Magic City recovery, we will watch a quick video, and after that video plays, the next voice you hear will be Mayor Woodfin.
I usually start with a short story of a mother who's a homeowner who has a child or a grandchild. She walks out into her front porch and she looks to the lot to the right of her, and there is a dilapidated house that's been there for years. And then she looks to the lot to the left of her, and there's an overgrown lot. And then she looks in front of her, and the sidewalk is buckling. The street hasn't been paved in quite some time. The neighborhood park that she wants to take her child or grandchild down to play in doesn't have the necessary adequate playground equipment, and it's getting dark. It's time to come back home, but the street light doesn't work. And her child or grandchild is hungry and it's time to eat, but she remembers she doesn't live in proximity to healthy food. And that is the state of what we inherited. But the story doesn't end there. And so we put millions into a blight removal program to make sure the next time she looked to the right, we remove that dilapidated house that was sitting here. We put more money into a weed abatement program as well as our land bank program to make sure we not only cut this overgrown lot to the left of her, but we find and fund enough adequate resources to go vertical with a single family home on this empty lot to the left of her. We've come up with a 5-year sidewalk plan to make sure that sidewalk is walkable, in addition millions of dollars into paving streets. We've started to invest in our 116 parks, realizing that playground equipment was adequate for that mother's child or grandchild to actually play in. We put resources in place to continue to want to get a grocery store to our city where there are food deserts on the east and west and north side of town. And addressing those neighborhood revitalization issues, I'm reminded that what we inherited you can't solve overnight, but we will stay committed to the number one issue in the city, which is making sure where our residents live within our 99 neighborhoods. If we continue to embrace the notion that the city of Birmingham is only as strong as its lowest quality of life neighborhood, then we have to continue to address every single issue I just described to you.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and good morning, everybody. You know, this year, the city of Birmingham is celebrating 150 years of existence. I believe it's the perfect time to both celebrate and build upon our community's legacy, a legacy that has redefined the true meaning of freedom for our entire world. As mayor, I'm in the position of being the number one cheerleader for our city, and I often like to remind people of that. But I'm also the number one cheerleader for all 99 neighborhoods. A big part of that duty is providing opportunity and home when our residents most need it. And so this fiscal year represents restoration. It represents growth following a very difficult year, I would define for all of us, or say for all of us. Civil unrest following the murder of George Floyd, a pandemic unlike anything we've ever faced before, and an economic crisis that followed. And sadly, the most devastating part, many of us don't have family or friends who are still with us today. We're all just one degree of separation from these hardships. So Birmingham had to make tough decisions. We had to make some unpopular decisions in real time for the health and well-being of our city and our citizens. Decisions that would save lives and invest in our small businesses as well as our hourly workers. Before federal assistance came to our city, we leaned on our local public private partners. We created a local public private partnership. It was called BHAM Strong. BHAM Strong developed resources and helped hourly workers who may have been laid off. Through those tough times, we continued our commitment as well as investing in the talent that already lives here. And that's the spirit of the Birmingham Promise, which provides apprenticeships and tuition to Birmingham City School students so that they can attend in-state college free of charge. Now, yesterday, a $455 million operating budget, the largest in our city's history, was passed. And the work of this budget will continue the work of helping us rebound. In it, it includes a 1.5% cost of living adjustment for our city employees. Also, $3.15 million for demolition, as well as weed abatement. There's $10 million for street resurfacing so you can stop dodging those potholes. And there's additional funding in there for a continued recycling program. And so much more, totaling $14 million in neighborhood revitalization efforts based on that video you just watched a minute ago. And so let me tell you what I believe. I'm so confident in our city's future because our goals are very, very clear. Neighborhood revitalization of both place and people, stimulating the restoration and growth of our city, as well as strengthening public-private partnerships. And I can't forget, welcoming the world to our doorstep next year for the history-making World Games events. What is this all about? It's about continuing our legacy of being a blueprint for change and being a place of opportunity. We are 150 years strong, built to last. And my favorite part, if I can be very candid with you all, we're just getting started. So thank you.
Thank you so much for that update, Mayor Woodfin. I will say, as someone who's been in Birmingham since 2016, I can say I'm excited about the progress that continues to happen in the city as well. So I do have a couple of questions for you. The first question being, what's your plan for using the American Rescue Plan funds for Birmingham?
Thanks for that question. I think the first place for me to start in answering it is the purpose of what the American Rescue Plan funding, its purpose and what it's used for. One is addressing those coronavirus issues that plagued our community and city. I think two, there were many, many gaps in our city's resources. And so finding ways to get these resources directly to our community so it can have immediate impact. And so, of course, many of you all know we started, opened, and created a process, a stimulus command center to have an intake process of those to actually apply for those American Rescue Plan. That actual deadline ends at 5 p.m. today to receive ideas, thoughts, and plans around how community members, those in the public sector, would like to see some of that money used. I think once that closes, there will be a process to where we communicate to the public how and what we plan to use that money on. The biggest thing I look forward to is the continuation of working with the city council to make sure we're all in lockstep on the same page as elected officials, delivering on that American Rescue Plan funding to improve the quality of life of our citizens.
Okay. You also mentioned Birmingham Promise. So just a quick question about that. Where is the funding from Birmingham Promise coming from? I'm hearing a lot of conflicting stories about, it being taken from school budgets. Can you clear that up for me a little bit?
Yeah, so it's pretty easy. The Birmingham Promise is a public-private partnership. So a portion of its funding comes from the city of Birmingham. Portion of that funding comes from the private sector. Prior to the Birmingham Promise being created, the city of Birmingham gave $3 million, which was a blank check to the Birmingham City school system. They were allowed to just say it was just a blank check to them. And so what we did was take two of that $3 million, and over a 5-year period, right at $10 million total, use that for apprenticeships for those same students that attend Birmingham City schools, juniors and seniors that can make $15 an hour livable wage while leaving high school early to receive high school credit hours, but being exposed to the workplace for a job that they may want in the future. The private sector money pays for the tuition side of their opportunity to attend any in-state 2-year, 4-year public college or university. Free tuition, all 2 years or all 4 years. No GPA requirement, no SAT requirement, no ACT requirement. The only requirement is that they live in the city limits of Birmingham, finish high school, and complete their FAFSA. Outside of that, no questions. So the Birmingham Promise, what I really want to encourage any rising senior in high school, they have the opportunity to go to school tuition free. And for any parent that's listening who has a rising senior or any child between kindergarten and 11th grade, this will also be an opportunity for your child as well.
Okay. So I have a background in engineering, and so math is my thing. And I also just completed my MBA at Sanford. So I'm a little bit curious about this next question. If we had a deficit in last year's budget, why do we have a surplus in money this year?
Yeah. Well, first, congratulations, brother, on completing your MBA. But the answer to your question is very direct. The city of Birmingham as it relates to our budget and how we create our budget. Our budget is based on projections. So let me repeat that. City of Birmingham budget is based on projections. Those projections are usually a combination of what's come in and the trend line of where certain taxes are going, such as business license and sales taxes and occupational taxes and lodging taxes, as well as permanent fees based off construction in our city. If I can use the example of the construction, the permitting fees, for example, many of you all have been seeing cranes every day, even in the middle of the coronavirus. And so our fee structures and our taxes are increasing, which increases our revenue. Related to last year during the coronavirus is simple. The same projections, the opposite happened. Businesses closed, so we lost business license, taxes. Employees were furloughed or laid off, so we lost occupational taxes. The actual tangible, not projection, but tangible number we lost right when everything shut down in March. So March and April and May, we know we lost a hard count of $17 million compared to the same time of the year before in 2019. If that trend line from a projection standpoint continued every quarter, that's how you got to a $63 million budget shortfall.
Okay.
You're better at the math, so I hope that worked.
Yeah, I love it. I have one more question for you, Mayor, and it's about crime. So, obviously within the last year, crime has really been out of control. And I'm not sure if it's because people have been cramped up in their homes from, due to the pandemic. But in regards to that, what are we doing to kind of control things?
So I want to put crime in context of two contexts. The first context is there's pain out here in our community. I'm saddened every time someone is shot, and I'm even more saddened when someone is actually killed from the gun violence that exists in our community, because I imagine that mother having the same grief and pain that my own mother experienced when my brother was killed. And so I want to acknowledge the victims of gun violence in the city, those who survived as well as those who did not survive, and a special acknowledgement to their family members who are grieving, the mothers, the husbands, the wives, the children, the siblings, like I was. And so it's tough right now. Let me also state that gun violence in the city of Birmingham, as well as gun violence in America right now, is a crisis. So much to the tune that in 2019, I declared gun violence in the city of Birmingham a public health crisis. an entire year and a half before a global health pandemic. And so where I am, I believe we have to give this the same attention we gave a global health pandemic. It is on our front doorstep. It is a crisis, and we have to have a sense of urgency around how to address it. And you address it through three things: prevention measures, enforcement measures, as well as reentry measures for those who are transitioning and coming out of prison and or jail. And so on the enforcement lane, which is in the middle, we've in the first half of the year, today is June 30th, and we've taken in 6 months, or right at June 30th, I should say, first half of the year, we've taken over 1,400 guns off our streets. But unfortunately, in the state of Alabama and so many other jurisdictions across the nation, the trafficking in guns is just so easy for people to get. The other unfortunate part is that the style of conflict resolution, people who have beef between each other, people who personally know each other, this is their style of how to solve their problem, which we have to work on more conflict resolution, which brings me to the prevention measures. Offering more job opportunities for our young people, as well as offering more conflict resolution engagement and programs for our young people, as well as violence interrupters, those in the community who can go out to the streets and engage those who who commit these violent acts or know people who commit these violent acts. And the last part is reentry. I think it's really important to engage those who come out of prison and for whatever reason that got them locked up, make sure they don't fall into the same habit again. So assisting those in getting their license or some form of ID, assisting them in getting some form of gainful employment, as well as other tools and opportunities to make sure they don't end up doing the same thing that got them in trouble the first time. I believe with all of those resources, we may can't predict and or prevent every gun perpetrator, but what we can do is continue to throw every resource and every tool we can at addressing this crisis that not only exists in Birmingham, but exists across our nation.
Thank you so much. I know I said that the last question was the last question, but we just got a couple of questions in, and this one is from Fred Sibley, and he says, last summer, the mantra defund the police was pushed as the way to see change in policing. In the grand scheme, people just want to see reforms. What type of reform the police options do you see being instrumental for the city of Birmingham?
The first thing I would say is holding officers accountable for whatever acts they commit against our citizens that are out of code or out of policy. And so we have a chief that I define as a Boy Scout. He doesn't play as it relates to accountability related to how police engage the citizens. If they do something in violation of BPD's policy, they're held accountable. That accountability is attached to transparency. So making sure the public knows when an officer has misconduct, there's public information that you can go and see those officers that they've committed and that what their punishment is for violation of those said policies. I think the other thing to do is a bridge, right? The bridge is trust and building trust. And how do we have more trust between police and the community? I think one of the biggest ways to do that is creating the civilian review board. And so we've done that. We've also created a task force, a citizens task force, to peel back all of our policies and procedures and to make sure that they work in 2021 as it relates to how we interact with our citizens. An example would be currently looking at how we engage in our warrants, whether it's knocking or no knocking. And so we don't have any Breonna Taylor situations ever again, not just in Birmingham or in the state of Kentucky, but in America. And so I think it's important that the city of Birmingham, based on our history here, right? Based on the fact that Eugene Connor, Bull Connor office was in the same building that I am in 2021 as public safety commissioner, which meant he gave the order to sic police dogs on Black citizens protesting. He gave the order to make firefighters use water hoses on Black peaceful protesters, that those things never happen again. And being in a position as mayor, the city of Birmingham should be on the forefront of police reform efforts for the entire country to see.
Well, thank you so much, Mayor. Well, I really appreciate that. Thank you for your time, and thank you for that Q&A dialogue.